That would be
Kelly, you ready? Okay. Special meeting will come to order. The script somewhere here. City Clerk, if you would call the roll, please.
Mayor Owen,
Here.
Vice Mayor Hartman,
here.
Commissioner Kolody,
Here.
Commissioner McGuirk,
Here.
Commissioner Sachs.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. So, going to go to public participation here in a minute, so you can be thinking. Just to set the stage real quick about what this meeting is and isn't. It's really a continuation of the last meeting, just a chance for us as a commission to discuss really two major points. Probably the most important is this the Turnbull Trace property specifically. Opening the aperture a bit to kind of next steps, but certainly want to make sure we focus on this Turnbull Trace. We're not voting today. We're not making a final decision today. My only ask is we will be making it at some future meeting. Let's not rehash everything we talked through today at that meeting also. Let's just get it out. We'll kind of see where we're at. If there's questions or feedback for staff we need to go through to be ready for that meeting. And then the last thing we can talk through here and then also vote on maybe at the next meeting would be giving staff some direction on any changes to the committee and that governing document, because that time is expiring. We heard, I think unanimously, we wanted to keep it going, but changing that scope, so I think we just need to give staff a little more direction. So that was my comment. So that's what the meeting is and isn't for the public's benefit. And now we'll open up public participation. All right.
He's been after me.
Scott Steger, Access Real Estate Property Solutions. I have 3 real estate brokerages in the area, so
I think you're turned off.
Yeah, let's just check real quick.
as if no one can hear me talk.
Yeah, right.
We have to record
How's
it.
that? Oh,
Oh, there we go.
Do you really want that? Again, Scott Steger, Exit Real Estate Property Solutions. I was at the earlier meeting, so I made a couple notes. I promise I'm not playing on Facebook or a game on my phone, but I don't have any handwritten notes. A couple comments were made by the panel earlier. One was in reference to a housing glut in an article that had been written recently, I think in Orlando. I haven't read the article, but I can tell you this. We represent a couple of the new developers in the area, and we're selling houses so fast that haven't been constructed yet that I have to keep moving my real estate license from model home to model home, because as soon as it gets built, somebody comes in and says, okay, I want that one, and I have to move the license. So houses are being purchased in our area at a fairly high rate. We talked a little bit about appraisals. I think it's important to remember that the appraisal is a value of the land as it stands now, not a value of the land as it might be at some point in the future. So when you talk about the number of parcels that might be divided up into a piece of land, it's not so much about those number of parcels, because that's not really what the appraiser is looking at when he looks at an appraisal. It's what is that in compared to other properties that are similar that have sold in the area. And offering money below appraised value, I can tell you in residential and commercial real estate in New Smyrna, that's a non-starter right out of the gate. Appraisals come in, and we literally have contracts that say, if the appraisal comes in higher than what you've offered on the property, you'll be paying that. So be aware that that's an issue as well. I really like the comment that was made earlier that when we look at the purchase price of a property, say at $2 million, and the sale price of it at 8 and some change, don't be upset because you weren't the one who bought it at $10 million and got a chance to sell it at $8 million. If that's the value of it today, that's what the value is today, and it's not necessarily about the amount that they were able to gain. There'll be more gain for them if they go and build houses on it. And really what you're doing in this particular purchase is you're trying to stop somebody from building additional homes on that piece of property. And I wanted to make the commission aware, if you're not already, the Ellison Acres property, which was on this list of properties that you could purchase with this grant, is no longer available because they got tired of waiting for you guys. They literally have decided it's off the market now. They're going to rebuild that school there, and that is no longer an option. So be careful as you're doing this. The mayor and I have had conversations about how government is a challenge because of its pace. Time is of the essence here. Every minute that we go by, the cost to build a new home goes up. Every time the property or the price of a new home goes up, the interest in someone selling it to you for the price that it is now goes down. So just a few things to make you guys aware of. And thanks for your time, and again, I've said it before, thanks for everything you guys do, because would not want to be sitting on that side for you guys as well. But thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Randy Herman, 108 Esther Street. I'd like to start off and thank Commissioner Kolody for his initiative for establishing the Citizens Committee, and I was very impressed with the discussion in the previous meeting and the expertise that each person brought, and I really was impressed with their ability to answer questions, some of the questions that you all posed directly, which I think will help in making this difficult decision. The second thing that struck me was one of the things the committee did, which it sort of wasn't an intention, but as Commissioner Hartman expressed a concern whether it would really do anything or be worthwhile, it certainly proved the value of public participation and citizen evolving into a committee that really can work with us. I think we all have distrust of government. We also have distrust of the public, and I think that both of those got boosted by that committee's performance, and I do hope we can continue with that committee, and maybe even they will help design some sort of oversight group for the Turnbull project, because it's going to be a big thing, hopefully for many years to come. So I could see them being the sort of the cornerstone of some kind of body that would aid the city in keeping track, and as Donna raised, the big task of keeping it clean and keeping it upgraded. So yeah, I salute that and salute your involvement, and I really thought that the meeting also exemplified what needs to happen, even though it's a lot more time for you all, outside of the normal city commission meeting. I think that kind of debate is hard to have in the commission meeting, and it was really great on the outside. And the last thing is, it sticks on my craw that we might have to pay this much money, and it's partially because it's hard for me to give the issue out of my head about how little they paid and the current value. But I do have a personal story in that my daughter-in-law's father buys extensively for the Nature Conservancy. And I asked him about this when I visited with him, and he said, you know, you have to realize that in many of these attempts to preserve land, somebody is going to make money. And he said, that is something you have got to live with, that you probably will have to pay more for some parcels than others. And he said, if you're truly committed, if the goal is to get that land, you have to kind of swallow that. So I don't know if that helps you in your decision making, but I do think it's something that he passed on, which is his wisdom of and having a lot of experience in buying land for conservation. So I wish you all well in this next meeting.
Thank you. I distrust government, and I'm up here in government. So. I share your sentiments. I know. It's a joke.
I know.
Any other public comments? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Barbara Frappier from Edgewater Avenue. These might be a little disjointed. I'm very interested in this project because I'm concerned. I live in Islesboro, and drainage is a big issue. And I've just come off a long time of them trying to fix the drainage in our area. And I've been very upset at a lot of what has been done. And the impact that rising floodwaters have and bad drainage. You have in place, you have in-ground individual septic systems. And I read recently that the one over by Turnbull Bay Road, the 25-lot subdivision, the septic leaching fields are going to be 2 feet above high water, which is totally unacceptable. There should be a minimum of 5 feet. I look at areas where they clear-cut lots and then put in some nice ornamental, but no one is looking at the fact that when you're in a floodplain or in an area that gets flooded, a single oak tree can suck up 100 gallons of water a day. So that goes a long way to helping attenuate drainage issue problems. There are other things that can be done. I spoke to someone when I looked at that 25-lot subdivision plans, and they're going to clear cut the lots and then put in nice, natural buffers around the perimeter, and which isn't very good because it's rather minimal. So now you're going to have St. Augustine lawns and ornamental shrubs, when what you could do is have a requirement that when you come in and clear a lot and you're taking out 4 30-inch oaks, then you have to replace them with caliper inch for caliper inch of the same native species, or at least at minimum 1 tree per tree. And that will certainly help with the uptake. The other thing is, the question was, I asked, why are you clear cutting these lots when you have acre lots? Why can't you just punch out for the house? Well, because it's in a floodplain. And the only way to attenuate that is to clear cut it, fill the lot up so that the house will be above the flood elevation. Well, there are things called pilings. And projects that I've designed, when you're in a floodplain and you need your first floor above a certain elevation, you put them on pilings. You don't clear cut a lot of natural vegetation. And I have a lot of other disjointed things. I'll go fast, but the only other thing is I'm really hoping that whatever you do maintains some sort of wildlife connectivity from lot to lot to lot, so that you don't punch out a big hole and so that the wildlife cannot move. And that's it for now. I'll save all my other comments and write them to you. Thank you.
Thank you. When you're going back to your seat, I'd just share two things. One is the young lady right here on your right, Donna, is very interested in the drainage as well related to the Turnbull Canal, so talk to her. And then if you stick around for the whole meeting, Brian would be happy to talk to you afterwards. We do have some requirements on when a tree comes out, the replacements, caliper for caliper. There's a lot of requirements around that. Obviously, we're not putting back in 100-year-old oak trees. We can't do that, but we do have some requirements around that, and we'd be happy to share some of those with you. So, any other public comments? Last chance. Seeing none. All right. Closing public participation, and we'll bring it to the commission. I know nobody really probably has much to say on this. All right, we'll start with Mike.
I do have a lot to say. As I said in the previous meeting, it's a high price to pay. There, 2 appraisals were done. They established a fair market value for the undeveloped land, which I believe was pretty correct, $29,000 to $32,000 per lot. The difficulty I have is the information that was provided to them. It's really, it's not been fully vetted. It differs from the state, the Water Management District, and the preliminary plat submitted to this town are 2 totally different documents. What was proposed on the Water Management District may possibly have been built, but the one that there is now really can't be. You can't build that number of lots from an analysis of the floodplains, the trees, and as was said, it just can't be done. I find that based on a really good review of it, you could probably build 220 lots on that thing. You wouldn't have too much of the uplands left, but the wetlands will be protected, the open waters will be protected, and a 10% of the uplands will serve as a buffer, and that will be protected. If we do nothing, we'll be left with a single-family home development, or 2, which is what it's zoned for. I don't like people who own property not to be able to develop it and use it as our ordinance state. If we buy this property, that's no longer a concern of mine because they're getting their fair market value for it or what they perceive. It's just it's very, very high cost for us to take 1/3 of the money that the bond issue authorizes and putting it in one place. It's very valuable. But as one of our speakers in the public said, we're really buying this to prevent houses, not necessarily to protect the environment, although that will be met. So we have to keep in mind that we're not setting a too high price that can be used in further negotiations, because we still have $10 million left. So I'm very concerned about the price. That's my thing. I supported the bond issue. I support the environmental concerns, as I have repeatedly, by trying to change our density requirements and our wetlands protection. I want them all saved. I just don't want to pay too much for it. Now, getting down to the bottom line, if they could build 220 lots, if they were knocked down to that value, they would then have a value, a purchase price, if they would agree to it, of $6,380,000. We have a grant that's going to provide 40%. So even if we paid $9 million for it, we still have out of the pocket $5.4 million. So our purchase, in my mind, is actually less than the true value of the property. The state of Florida, which we contribute mightily to, is picking up a lot of the tab. So it's really public money going into it. If the rest of the commission is comfortable with it, I would be comfortable with it. But I just want them to understand, and the public to understand, is we're buying a lot of land to prevent houses as much as protecting the environment. I don't think that was the true intent of the bond issue. But that's how the facts are coming out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before I go on, I just want to clarify for the public and those that may not have been at the last meeting, there's going to be a lot of numbers thrown out, so I wanted to get a few numbers out that you'll hear repeatedly. So the property has, property we're talking about, the Turnbull Trace property, it's 151 acres, if I recall off the top of my head. I don't have that number in front of me. 151 acres. We had two appraisals that were done by two different firms in the state of Florida, $8.5 million and $9.38 million. That gives you an average value of $8,940 if you average between the two of them, which is what was negotiated with by Trust for Public Land on sort of on our behalf as a potential purchase price with the property owner. They paid for the property. I don't have this number in front of me again, but $2.5 million is the number that's kind of been tossed around that they've paid for it. There are other carrying costs they no doubt have had, but their purchase price was $2.5 million. We'll talk about the relevance of that, I'm sure, later. And then the city of New Smyrna Beach has received a state grant of up to $3.6 million. That is a 60-40 match. So if the purchase price goes down, we save 60 cents on the dollar. The state reduces the grant amount accordingly by 40 cents on the dollar. This year, that fund that we received those monies from, that pool was $10 million. So we received 36% of the funds available in the entire state of Florida. Next year, the funding pool is zero. So, and there's, no indication of when it may come back or be, more funds might be available. And for clarity as well for the public, that $3.6 million, as I've had it explained to me, is only applicable to this property. So it only applies to this property. It would be a new grant process. We would go to the back of the line, and we would be getting in line for $0. We couldn't get back into this funding pool. They would simply pull up the next highest project up, as everything would shift up. So those are kind of all the facts as I know it. Just want to get all those out on the table. Again, a lot of numbers are going to be thrown around over the next little bit by all of us. So I wanted you to have as many of those on the top of your head as possible. Anything I've forgotten to add? Any other facts or numbers particularly?
The July 10th.
Yeah. So we're having this discussion today. We're not making a decision today. We'll be making a decision at our next meeting, not tomorrow, but the 23rd. And then we have a July 10th, we have a contract in place, so the Trust for Public Land has a contract by July 10th, is how long we have to make a decision on this particular property. And then much bigger picture overall, of course, all of this was instigated by the passage by the voters of a ballot measure authorizing the commission to issue bonds for up to $15 million for the preservation of land along the Turnbull Creek watershed. Paraphrase that slightly, you can find the bond language out there. So, all right, that's my spiel on all the numbers. Mr. Kolody has given his piece. I have more to say, but I'll hold it. Any other comments from the commission?
You going down the line, or?
Oh, we'll go down the line.
let's
Sure.
go
Jake,
down
go
the
for
line.
it.
I just have a few concerns. I love the idea of purchasing land to hold in conservation, hopefully in perpetuity. From the beginning, I had concerns about the price because it was disclosed about the range that we would be spending on this parcel. I was hopeful that we could negotiate. It seems that chances are slim that we would negotiate beyond the parameters of the two appraisals. So, in essence, to be a true conservationist of land, you have to pay the price. And so we as a city have to decide on behalf of our constituents that we're going to pay that price. Yes, it is high again. Yes, it is worthy. I believe so. It is a statement and has a lot of good aspects to that statement. We're saving land from being developed. We're creating a small pocket of environment and habitat and some endangered species in there, I'm sure, as well. So we're making a major statement, and I'm given strength by the fact that major conservationists had said this is the right thing to do. And I don't want to say we make deals with devils to get what we want as conservationists, but sometimes it doesn't have to be so. Sometimes there are people who are profiteers. It does not matter. Let's just strike a good deal with these folks, and if we can get more input from the public, they're always welcome to join me at my June 13th town hall at 6 p.m. at the Brandon Center, and you'll have much more time than 3 minutes to express your concerns. But I have to weigh as a public figure to figure I've got this wonderful piece of land in one hand and the dollars, our tax dollars, to spend on it. I think we're putting a bit of a burden on ourselves, but we're creating something that's going to make a buzz and a stir and make a real pocket of beauty that we can conserve on the earth and say it's our fellow New Smyrnans did this. So that's my brief comment.
Heck of a plug, Jake. Good job on that. I like that. That was good. Good timing. You went right into it. I don't have a lot to say on this other than we've had an independent body of high recognition issue and go out for 2 appraisals on this property. I understand the concern. Anytime you buy something, you don't want to overpay. Mm-hmm. This is so important. This trumps whether or not we should split hairs with small amounts of money. I would love to buy it for $6 million. I'd love to buy it for $4 million. I'd love to buy it for $2 million. But I'm going to tell you this. Come hell or high water, I'm going to do exactly what the people out there, our residents, instructed us to do, which is buy this piece of property. And we're going to do it in the right way. We've been open, transparent, and I look forward to getting this property as soon as we can and protecting it. The one issue that I felt was kind of getting thrown out there a little bit and may cloud it up is, what do we do with this property? This property is currently zoned for residential development, and I believe that we should do absolutely nothing with this property, and it should remain in the state that it is in conservation. It should maintain its current state in perpetuity. Whether or not we put some kind of passive park in it, which I think is the name for basically doing nothing, that's great. We should certainly rezone the property as soon as possible to a use that does not allow any development on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
72% of the voters voted in favor of this. I mean, those are hard numbers to contradict. You, like Commissioner McGuirk, nobody wants to think they overpaid for something that they could get for less. But I think for the value that we're getting here, we have a lot of discussion about the number of lots, total number of lots, possible lots, but it's not the lots, it's the piece of property. The appraisal was for the entire piece of property. We have a wonderful opportunity to buy land with the Turnbull Creek Canal on it and conserve it and put it in conservation for our future generations. It's going to be the center of our city. How can you say no to something like that? Whether we leave it in its existing state forever, I think there's some room to discussion. I certainly think that if we use it, we could use it for a teaching facility, maybe a small pavilion where future generations, children, MDC can come and use this site and, would have someplace out of the weather where they could learn about the history of the creek, where they could see the flora and fauna that's out there, native, the wildlife. I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity, and I look forward to this. So, thank you.
Okay. So, it's going to take a minute. I apologize. I've spent a tremendous amount of time on this. This is a decision I don't take lightly. It's a lot of money, and you've got, as has been pointed out, 72% of the voters has spoke very clearly on what the desire was. Now it's up to us, and my commitment to the voters during the campaign, when this was also being bantered about, was I'll make sure that we're doing the right thing as a city. I'll make sure we're not getting taken advantage of as a city. If this passes, that will be my focus, is applying every level of kind of business acumen that I have to this process. So I just want to share some of the ways that I've arrived at where I think I'm at on this, and just so that my thought process is clear. Because I remember many times sitting out there thinking, I wish I knew why they were thinking that. So I don't do it on every case, but I'm going to take just a moment doing it because I think it's important. The first thing I did is, we talked about the developer bought it for $2.5 billion, and we're over here wanting to pay, let's just round it to $9 million. That's painful. I mean, it's tough to see somebody else make a profit like that. So to help me think about it, I changed the narrative on myself, and I said, if this had been owned by some little local old lady and been in a family knew locally forever, and so there was no kind of basis for the price, would I be balking so badly at the appraised value? Would I have looked at that appraised value differently if I didn't have that as a cost basis, and if it wasn't some external developer that was about to have some windfall? And the answer for me was, that kind of changed it for me a little bit. Like, I realized the appraisal is the appraisal, and what they paid for it really, that is what it is. And I was reminded of, and I was going to pull the article up, but we've all heard the stories about the Picasso at the yard sale, right? The Mickey Mantle card at the yard sale, where somebody buys a painting for $10, and then they turn around and sell it to some museum for $10 million. And was the painting ever worth $10? Well, yeah, that's what somebody paid for it, but it was worth more the whole time. And so this is appraised at what it's appraised at, and so what they paid for it, which I know is of great concern to many citizens, that is what it is. I can't tell you what it would appraise for the day they bought it. I don't have that information, but I can tell you what it's appraised for now, and now it's our chance to hang the Picasso in the museum. And what are we willing to pay to hang the Picasso in the museum? Should we be hung up on the $10 or not? The other thing that I spent some time on, because I'm a finance guy, so I ran the numbers as if I were them, and I used every available resource I had. I sat down with a local builder and said, hey, help me understand, if you owned this piece of dirt, you and I are business properties, we owned this piece of dirt, how much could we stand to make on it? If we started building tomorrow, here's everything we know about it, how much could we make? So essentially what I'm asking myself is, I'm giving them a risk-free return. I know what that is. But what is their upside potential if we don't do that? Is the juice worth the squeeze for them? And I can tell you from the numbers that I ran, and there's tons of variables. Commissioner Kolody has pointed them out very well. There's tons of variables. But I'm convinced the juice is worth the squeeze for them. If we don't do this, I'm convinced that there's money to be made for them. I don't think they'll sit around and wait on us and quabble over, $100,000 here or there or $1 million here or there. I think they'll move on and make their return. As best I can figure, with some parameters, not to the extremes that Commissioner Kolody pointed out, but even shaving off a few lots, I was coming up with they can make anywhere from 50 to 60% more if they develop the property. And that's just building out developable lots, not building the house itself. That's another way the developer can leverage their return, is to hold some of the lots and build the house itself, because there's also money to be made there. So I'm convinced that they're not anxious to sell from that vantage point. They're not over a barrel to sell from that vantage point. Do I think that there's room for negotiation? Do I think that we, if it had just been, me and Scott locked in a room, could we have negotiated differently if it was a private business, not a government doing the negotiation? Perhaps, maybe. Is there money maybe being left on the table? Are we buying at the absolute peak of the market? Yeah. I mean, it's, I guess, I don't know, it may keep going up. But the grant keeps rattling around for me. There's no money left. We don't know when there will be more grant money. And so if we back away from this deal, or they back away from this deal, we leave $3.6 million on the table. And that's still our money. That's still tax money. So I don't count that as free money, as some may. But it is free money to the citizens of New Smyrna. That hasn't all come out of our pockets. It's come out, Miami is chipping in on this with us. Jacksonville's chipping in on this with us. And that's weighed on me pretty heavily, because then I start saying, yeah, I could go back and try to negotiate down $100,000. Well, first of all, we're only getting 60 cents on the dollar back, 40% from the grant. And then if they walk away, we leave $3.6 million on the table. And if I put myself as the average business person, you don't roll dice trying to quibble over $100,000 here or there, or $1 million here or there, if you can potentially lose $3.6 million in the process. And then really what settled it for me was, so my wife is really not into local politics, and so she doesn't follow any of this really all that closely. And we went the other day and we played frisbee golf at the park there, and then we went walking up the track, and we got to the bridge that goes across Turnbull Creek, and we stopped, and I looked north and south, and I said, there's a development, and there could be docks sticking, look how pretty this is, and then picture this with homes and docks. And she was like, really, is that like on the plan? I'm like, well, yes, there's a plat that shows that, there's docks approved, there's St. John, it's not a done deal, but it could easily happen, and this is where we're at. And I kind of explained all these different choices we got to make and how it's tough. But at the end of the day, I want to stand on that bridge in 20 years, in 50 years. Can't go any further. I think that's about it. I want my kids to stand on that bridge in 50 years and be looking at the same view. Maybe opened up a little bit for drainage, but roughly the same view. And when you zoom out that far, I don't think we have much of a choice. If I could start over, would I change a few things about how we've gotten to where we are? Yes. But I wasn't here. I'm not questioning what was done. I'm just saying I think we could have done things different. We'll know for next time. So that's my thought. That's kind of where I'm at. That's the thought process that got me to where I'm at. I do have a couple of things. Number one is the perpetuity is very important to me. And I read a quote the other day. I don't remember where. It said perpetuity in government speak usually means 20 years. This doesn't mean 20 years for me. When I say perpetuity, I mean grandchildren type perpetuity. So whatever we have to do to make sure this isn't the next AOB site that some future commission has got on the auction block, we have to make sure it's done before this commission goes up for election in 2020. So if we do this, it better mean perpetuity, forever and ever, amen. And then the last one would be if there's any other things like closing costs, and these are probably negligible because we're at the city, so we don't probably pay a lot. But I'd say at the minimum, if we could go back to them or the Trust for Public Land and say, look, you're going to roll in all the closing costs. We'll cover, I guess, our attorney's fees because I want to pick our attorney. But any other closing costs, title insurance type stuff, if we can roll that in, I think we could. I had a conversation with Kate. I think we could do that. That's probably not asking too much. So that's my thoughts. It's the Picasso at the yard sale. I think we've got to do it. And do I love it? Yes and no. And that's the tough spot. I mean, it really is. And you heard that at the meeting earlier. You heard that from Mr. Weston and Donna and folks that are still here. And we talked after the meeting individually, fully transparent. And yeah, it's tough. We've learned some lessons. We can do it better, and we'll talk about that at a future meeting. But that's where I'm at. So apologize that was long, but wanted to get all that out there.
Well said, Mayor.
Yes.
I do support the purchase, even if it is at the 8.9 whatever, only because of the $3.6 million grant, because I think the net to us does come in lower than what I feel is the actual value of it. So I will do that. But one thing I do want to remind the commission of, we're borrowing this money. There's a cost that's associated with that. And one of the things that I did say when running for this office was that if we are going to purchase this land, that I don't want that debt service to interfere with maintaining our millage rate or perhaps lowering it. So I'm going to be looking for reductions elsewhere to compensate for that. So that's my comments.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just another quick comment. And we can go back, because I think we need to go back and forth. I need to know post haste. I don't know how you figure out the formula as to what percentage of the cost of your house is, but what is this going to cost, bottom line, at, let's say, the low side, the low appraisal? What is it going to cost our taxpayer? We're going to have to pay the principal and interest, and how does that equate to the yearly taxes on a house of $100,000+?
I mean, does anybody from staff, and not if you can, I know we had that during the campaign on an average house value of $250K. You have it.
Yeah, I have it. So this was from the campaign. So these numbers are, I'll give you some examples. So
This is on the whole 15 million.
well, I'm going to give you 10 million, just
Okay.
so that's a nice round number. So for 10 million, the annual debt service on this is, let's see, what's the rate? 3% interest rate is the annual debt service would be $510,000, $510,193. So that's $500,000. And the average cost per year to the average household, so that would be the average assessed value, I'm assuming, is $25. And the mill levy increase on that 10 million would be 0.141. So if that gives you a sense of,
So the dollar amount's $25 per household.
on $10 million bond issue at 3%.
I did- thank-
$25 per average assessed.
Yeah, which I think Nancy has is $250.
And it was $28 for the 15 million, and the average house was at $179 or $38. I'm sorry, and the average household was at $179,000.
Right.
So 179,000. So for the whole 15 million, it was 38. You've got.
Yep.
Okay. Using that same 3%, and I'm going to really put you on the spot. Do you know if that's over 20 or 30? 30 years.
That was 30 years.
30 years. Okay. I thought it was 20.
I believe it's 20.
I think it's
This says 30, but
okay.
I'm not sure.
Either way, it's $38 per average household.
Thanks.
And Mayor, for the next meeting, I will ask the finance director to give us several options in terms of financing and also to give you all these scenarios.
Okay. Any other?
No, and that's the bottom line. The concern is, thankfully, people have something they can see and hopefully go to and walk through and smell and enjoy for the money that they know they're paying in taxes. Other than other taxes that you don't know where the money's going. You'll know exactly where your money's going.
Commissioners?
Mayor, all I want to say is, I think your well thought out comments pretty much hit the nail on the head. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
I think for $40 a year to go out there and view that piece of property and enjoy that, whenever I want to, I think is well worth it, so.
Okay. So again, we're not making a decision today. I slipped something in at the very end about the closing cost. Kate, do you want to just comment on that and what you think that may, it's not a lot, but what your thoughts are on that to make sure the commission's comfortable?
So the main closing costs to you are going to be if you hire an outside real estate attorney, which you probably would want to do to represent you for the closing. And if you want title insurance, which you probably do, I believe, because I have to get it too, because I'm buying the land and then selling it to you, so I have to get title insurance also. And I think it was around $14,000 or $15,000 for the policy, and then they give you a slight break if you do a reissue, like a few days later or something. I'm willing to cover that, the title insurance for you. I think you probably want to hire your own lawyer and pay for that, and that shouldn't be a big ticket item unless you make their lives really difficult and spend lots of hours on negotiating things. But those are really your main costs. The seller pays the transfer taxes, the dock stamps, and then we're a nonprofit, so we don't have to pay those. So.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So on July 10th, we'll probably be voting on this,
You'll be voting on the 25th.
25th. Of June. And then, just so the public knows, is that Florida Trust will actually be purchasing the property. And then in return, we'll be selling it to us at some point later than that.
That's when we can really negotiate.
Yeah, so we buy it and sell at the same price, and we try to do that within a couple days, so.
Okay.
And the closing we wouldn't have to close until, I believe, the beginning of September. So in terms of your financing, how we're gonna do that, and I know the finance director's been looking at some options, because it doesn't necessarily make sense to go to the bond market just for this one transaction. You might wanna wait until you've done a few and then fund those all at the same time through bonding, or other things that you have to go out to the bond market for. So it's John, right?
Yeah.
John's looking at some different options of how to fund this on a short-term, basis until you do the bonding.
Okay.
But we'll buy it like on a Friday and sell it to you on a Monday or something like that. They'll be back-to-back kind of transactions.
But the closing will give us enough time to look at those funding options and.
You'll have 2 months essentially from when
Okay.
you make your decision to line that up.
Okay.
To my colleagues, a question? This might be a good time to ask. I love the word I can't even say it. In perpetuity. What do you guys think about that? Because I hear it bantered about, we could save this and sell it, and I think not.
Wait. Who says we can save this and sell that? Not up here. I haven't heard that.
Not necessarily up here,
Okay.
but you've heard people.
Just want to clarify.
Yeah. So that's the intention, and the question would be, are we allowed to do that? Hopefully not, since other agencies are helping us out.
You're not allowed to do it.
That's cool.
Because you're getting that Florida Communities Trust grant money, so they are going to be watching, make sure you don't convert the land to any non-allowed use under the grant, which is basically conservation passive park.
So Katie,
Can you speak to just maybe the terms of that, how long the grant terms would apply that they'll be watching us?
I'm pretty sure it's 30 years
Okay.
that we would have to do that for. And we will be reporting every year on what we're doing. And we do that with all of our other lands that we've done with FCT also.
But, North Beach Park, it's almost the same thing. And then FEMA, when we purchase homes, they make us do on the deeds to write this. So it's guaranteed forever, so.
And we could do that with the deed also.
so it sounds a little kitsch, but a father could say to his son, your grandson will be able to see this land as well in the city of New Smyrna Beach. We have no plan to develop, sell, break up.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think what you're alluding to, because the one thing I have heard thrown out as an option, not from anyone up here, just to be very clear, was, hey, if we're only trying to preserve the creek, could we take the 10 acres abutting the creek and then take the rest of it and do something else with? And the answer is no, because of this grant. The whole parcel that they're involved in, which is all of it, is tied up for 30 years. My question for staff would be, not to answer right now, but what can we do to make sure, 30 years is a long time, but it's not forever and ever, amen. How can we make sure in the 31st year, what can we do?
What I've seen is you can add layers to make it more and more difficult to ever undo to do something different, essentially. So, for example, you start out, you change the zoning, change the future land use, you put a conservation easement over it. You can dedicate that conservation easement to the city, to the water management district, or perhaps other entities who would all have to give up their rights to that for something to occur on the property. That's just a conceptual example, but that's how you protect land long.
I like it. Do it all.
Exactly. I like that.
Yeah. Perfect. Good answer. Does that answer,
Thanks.
Does that answer your questions?
Yes.
Can I just add?
Yes.
And the bond money that you're going to theoretically spend on this was, voted on for a designated purpose. So that is another layer of protection, is that, the money can't be spent, that land was purchased for a specific purpose, and so it shouldn't be converted. But just to the conservation easement thing, I think if you wanted to do that pretty soon after you buy the property, that would probably be the best time to do it, and the most, the time when people are going to feel most secure that there's, some protection forever, and the water management district would probably be the first place to go, the easiest place to go. There's not a local land trust really that I'm aware of, or maybe you all know more about that, but it would probably be the water management district would have the capacity to enforce that over time, whereas, a small organization may or may not be around in 50 years, but they're going to be around. So if they have an easement and somebody says, hey, they're building a school on the property, they're going to have the resources to sue you if necessary, or sue the future you, to enforce that. So I think that's a good thing to kind of roll into this whole process, is that's what you're going to do next in terms of next steps. So what are we doing with this property? We're going to put a conservation easement on it. So.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion on this item? I know we've got a couple others I threw out that I wanted to cover, committee and some other stuff. But anything else on this particular property? Okay. If you think of something, we can come back to it. The one thing I was going to add, that I had in my notes I forgot, is I know what it's like to overpay for property. I had some property behind me that was zoned for up to 15 units per acre. Would have completely ruined the neighborhood, and this past year I overpaid for that property. But it was important for me to know what was being built in my backyard, and so now I get to do it again. All right, let's talk about the committee. We talked before, I think we're all in agreement, extending that term. Hopefully those same members are willing to serve, or we can find equally qualified members, although those folks knock it out of the park. A lot of discussion about changing scope. We'll come down the line again. Commissioner Kolody, I'll defer to you as your brainchild from the beginning. Talk to me about, it's going to stay, what's the scope changes we need to have staff start working into that ordinance?
Well, it's understood the primary focus is to give out information to the public. But I would add to that to allow them to make recommendations, truly recommendations, to the commission on items that do come before them. And I would like to see some form of a schedule as to how we proceed with the analysis of the rest of the basin and what we should spend the remainder of our monies on.
That's the next discussion I was going to have once we get past the committee. It's kind of how do we pick the next property. So anything in addition on the committee, on the scope of the committee? Just
to tack on, with thanks to the committee, hopefully they'll want to stay on. And I wonder, does our body have the wish to have them be a conservation committee? I vaguely heard that other cities have those types of committees.
I would have to, I'm okay with the Conservation Committee, whether or not that's the committee, if they're willing to do it, great. I would have to understand what they're
The scope.
doing. I mean, yeah,
Yes.
and we'll have to look at some other cities, but I'm not opposed to that in the slightest. So if you want to work with staff, bring back some examples, and
Sure.
in a future meeting, tell us, hey, kind of here's what they would accomplish and be focused on, and what their mission would be.
Yes.
We just don't want to meet to meet. We have
No,
some
of course.
committees that meet to meet. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Girk.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to give a congratulations to Commissioner Kolody for coming up with this. I think that it is working pretty well. Good job on that. My only, I guess what I would like to see from the committee is we specifically task them with something to give back to us, as opposed to something where they simply make recommendations. The reason I say that is because I've used the Planning and Zoning Board as an example. If we give them that authority, but then they're not held accountable politically, I worry that it turns into something similar. So I think I understand where you want to go with this, and I think, for example, they talked about ranking properties. I think that is a great example of where we can task them with something specific that they can then give back to us their recommendation, and then we can take that recommendation and use it as a guidance for our decision, final decision. So I think what I'm saying is, regardless of what it is, I don't want just open-ended opinions on everything from them. I want to task them with something specific. That's how I'd prefer to handle that. Thank you, Mayor. That's it.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
To add along with that, I agree with Commissioner McGuirk, but I would also like for them to not only rate the properties, but maybe also give us some thoughts or insight as to what they think should be done with those particular properties. I know Donna's concern is clearing of the canals. If we ask them to rate those properties, should we not also say which one would give us serve our better needs? Do we need to clean the headwater first? If we buy a piece of property in the middle, should that be a priority? Or when they prioritize these, we need to think over the overall condition of the canal and where we're going to get our, a greater return or best buck for this. Aside from that, Chairman Tripp wasn't able to be here to the earlier meeting, so I would like to know if staff could reach out to her and see if she had any written comments that she would like to give each of us. Because, she spent a lot of time on this, and she has done a lot of work up in the northern end of the canal. So I'd like to see if she had any written comments that she'd like to share. With regards to your Conservation Committee, I think certainly that if we extend them for 6 months, certainly at that point in time, maybe we want to create a standing committee, where we could do a standing Conservation Committee. I think that would be certainly an opportune time to do that. But I would think that within the next 6 months or so, we should have an idea where we're going to go with the bond issues. Those are my comments. Thanks.
And Kelly acknowledged she'll reach out to Chairman Tripp and pass along any comments she has to the whole committee. So, yeah, good thought. And the other gentleman, his comments were read into my thoughts are in line with the commission. I like expanding the scope to include specific recommendations, that kind of racking and stacking. I think what I'm thinking is kind of a blend between a P&Z and a staff recommendations. We get agenda items and it says, staff recommends approval or denial. And then we get P&Z and it says P&Z recommend, approved or denied, and it says kind of how the voting was. I think some blend of that, because they may not come to a consensus, so they may not be able to say the committee recommends approval or recommends denial. But being able to just say, hey, here's our recommendation, and here's kind of how that shook out, and the people that disagreed, here were their concerns, because it's knowing the thought process as much as it is just knowing kind of how the vote went, knowing any concerns that were brought up. So, but I would love to hear that feedback in a kind of a codified form. And I think that was my only comment on that. So, has that given you enough? I'll come to you in one second. Carrie, has that kind of given you enough to make tweaks to that? Commissioner Kolody may have something to add to that. But.
So what I have right now is to extend them for an additional 6 months, allow them to make formal recommendations. The question I would have is, do we want to be specific in, I'm thinking you'd want to keep your resolution general rather than specifically say rank properties. I mean, you can give that direction from the commission level down and communicate it that way, but I could keep the scope general but include recommendations. Instead of review, it'll say review and recommend to the city commission related to property acquisition along the Turnbull Creek. And then after the 6 months, we're talking about a conservation committee, which we could either change the name or wherever you want to go from there. So kind of 2 steps is what I've heard.
Okay with all that, but let's see if Kolody has.
I like that idea, and I like that wording, not to be too specific. Back on May 31st, I did come up with a target schedule as to how we should proceed and to who should do those various tasks. So I would like to see the commission review that, because that does answer some of the questions that I've heard from other members sitting up here. And like to know whether they agree or disagree with that as a way to move forward. So we don't have a committee after 5 months saying, did we really do anything? They're very knowledgeable. As to the permanent establishment of a conservation type of committee, I have no problem with that, but I would like to see the Turnbull Bay thing move forward first before we go to that extent.
Agreed. And is that in the agenda pack? I saw it. I can't remember where I saw it now.
It's in the package. Basically, it shows 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 steps before we actually purchase the property. It's got responsibilities for the committee, for the staff, and for the commission on it. And I think it would be a guideline.
I read it, and I remember thinking it was pretty comprehensive. I liked where it was headed, so I'll spend more time with that and give you some feedback at our next.
Okay. It was in the 1,549 pages attached to our last agenda.
Okay. Yes, that's why I can't put my fingers on it right away.
Yes. I'll ask the staff to redistribute it.
Okay.
It looks like packet page 5 of
something.
the one that's in front of you tonight.
Got it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
a question for staff. They don't have to answer now, of course. Is it possible that the St. John's Water Management District, since they are in charge of all the waters of Florida, have a responsibility to help us keeping the creek or the man-made creek clear, since it falls into a water body of significance? So the question is, could St. John's help us clean out that canal?
I'll answer that, yes, potentially. Depends on what exactly we wanted to do. There are water management district programs, technical assistance, funding programs available for that type of activity. They have been implemented throughout the state, so it is something we can pursue.
Yes, like an example would be the north shore of Lake Apopka has been improved, so these are the type of projects maybe we could engage them in. Thanks, Brian.
So last item I had, kind of moving to that next steps, and I have found that now, and I did like that. One question I had is, so that we have this kind of big chunk of land, this the target, this target parcel. From here, it becomes a bit more fragmented, and we heard today earlier one of the parcels that I was hoping would kind of connect it all, like I pictured this nice trailhead Ellison Acres that connected the Turnbull Trace, and you could go all the way from 44 to Pioneer Trail and natural property. So disappointed to hear that's off the market. I didn't know that until tonight. But those next properties that we pursue, how we go about doing that, how we go about out of all the available properties along the creek. Remember, this isn't just every property in New Smyrna; it's along this area. How we get there. You've got identified target properties by the committee starting June 10th. We'll figure that out, but 7-day time frame to do that. There's a lot of questions there. What are they basing that on from a target property standpoint? So what are the commission's thoughts on how do we open up the next chapter on this? Do you have some thoughts, Brian, on that?
We've had an item, it was in the agenda packet for the previous meeting, which is a consultant scope of work for the remaining approximately 112 parcels to take the data we have, get some additional data. They're more trained environmental specialists to compile that, get it to our staff, we get it to the committee. We would start coming up with that ranking or at least some criteria, work with the committee to establish criteria to establish that ranking. That would be the first process. It would fit into Commissioner Kolody's scope somewhat. It would be bringing in a consultant to do that, however. But we are ready to move forward with that. It's not really expensive. I think the entire scope was less than $15,000.
Okay.
We can move on that right away.
Would you be looking at all properties and then talking, let's see whether or not they're willing sellers, or would you look at try to weed out willing sellers and we'll only look at their property?
This would be a first pass to be all data, and then not even contacting property owners about whether it's available or interested. Just looking at prioritizing based on value.
Okay.
I think the idea was at the time when we thought about the consultant is to look at the entire piece of properties, put them on a priority list, and then as soon as we establish that, then we could reach out to the property owners.
Well,
No, my question is, would that be us or would that be Florida Land Trust?
That's another question we've got to. That's another question we have to decide.
As far as I know, it's to be determined. I wasn't sure, don't know if it's been established, if it's a staff role in making contact with future property owners.
So would it not follow the same process that we just are going through now? Or would we actually be out there? Katie?
It could.
It's up to you and to me. So, I mean, it depends on what you come up with. If you have, 50 properties you want to go after, I'm probably not going to be able to do that from Tallahassee. But if you come up with a top few list that you're really concerned are going to get sold or developed before you're able to make any headway, and you want me to help out with that, I can do it on a project-by-project basis. But we'll just have to see what they come up with and whether you feel like there's somebody locally who can help you approach those, landowners, or if you want me to help you with some of them, we can look at that once they get. I think this is great because you'll have, something to go on. But I guess the answer is we'll see what you want to do.
Okay.
And what we have the capacity to help with.
And remember, their business model is that we're not writing them a check. The property owner is, if they so choose, to make a donation once it's finished. So if you're dealing with individual homeowners, those donations get small. They don't even cover one trip from Tallahassee for Kate.
Yeah.
It would have to be larger,
Oh, yeah.
purchase price, like $1 million and over, probably. So the little smaller things are probably not going to be. You could probably have a local realtor or someone help you with that.
We have lots of them.
I'm sure there are lots of them in the audience who might really help.
So, Commissioner Kolody.
I just expand a little bit about my thoughts on this. For the first part, we had the bio blitz created. We got a lot of nice maps with colors on them that do identify some of the most viable properties to help the environment. And I think that's a good guideline, and I'm sure the committee can go through that and identify those. We're not going to get them all. There's going to be little ones, there's big ones, there's conservation easements. There are some large properties out there that I think the trust would be very helpful on. So I don't see the need for a consultant at this point. I know the staff is very busy, but I'd like to try it out without one first and see how it works. We're not under any gun to purchase right now any other particular properties that I know of. So I think let's just kind of wade through it a little bit.
Mayor? Sure. Although I would like, with the commission's agreement, to direct staff to quickly give Ed Ellison a call and see where that property is. If it's the property I'm thinking of, I'd be disappointed that we didn't get a chance to make a run at this. And that would be the one from 44 to Jungle Road on the west side of Temple. That's all undeveloped. So certainly I'd like to direct staff as soon as possible to get on that. Well, maybe they already did.
They're already on it. Look at that.
The property on the west side of the creek is still for sale. It's the property on the east side where the nursery is and the school is. They're the ones that don't want to sell now.
Okay, but that from 44 on the west side of Temple that goes all the way to Jungle and would probably tie into what we purchased is still available.
It's still available.
So that's good news, although it's bad news. I understand what you wanted to do, and I thought that was a great idea. But like you say, we're not gonna get them all.
Correct. And on that, perhaps on the east side, they may be willing to grant a conservation easement along the waterfront, property they can't use anyhow.
So my only concern, I hear you, we're not under any kind of a pressing time frame other than the story we just heard. That, this was a property that we could have gotten and now we can't. And I don't know how many more of it. It's a hot market. If it cools off, then we'll be brilliant because we'll have waited for the market to cool off and we'll all take credit for that. But if it doesn't, then we'll lose opportunities at some properties. And so it's, that's another dice roll that is tough to know. Going back to the not doing the consultant, though, are you saying just using that BioBlitz data that we've already got for the committee to do the assessment, or staff doing additional work on top of that?
No staff additional work on that. Let the committee take a look at all that data, and if they see any particular properties that stand out, I know they have their opinions on it already, and see where that goes. Okay. Then the staff can handle the contacting to see if the people are interested, and then we go from there. That's a good jumping off point.
Brian, I know you were very engaged with that whole BioBlitz thing. What do you think the consultants kind of bring into the table? Are they giving us a lot more information that we can work with, or is it?
Well, the BioBlitz was just environmental value.
Okay.
I think that's one piece. The idea for this consultant, he would look at economic development potential as well as environmental value, reviewing what we have, parcel ownership, parcel size, valuation, and potential public benefits. So really bringing a number of different components that could help us make priority and purchase decisions.
Do you have an idea on the time that he would require to do something like that? I don't remember if I saw a time limit in there.
Doesn't specify a time limit, but I think this would certainly help us expedite the process. We can perform this task with staff. Just based on resources, it could take longer.
Yeah, I'd be more in favor of subbing it out.
Okay. I think we need to give staff direction, so we'll just come down real quick. We got one for subbing it out.
Subbing it out.
Subbing it out, Commissioner Sachs. Subbing it out. I think you want.
Where will we pay for it from?
General fund.
General fund. Okay. No.
Okay. I'm okay with subbing it out as well. So I think we're good to engage the consultant, give us that extra data for the committee to review. And you said 15,000 was the cost max.
It's very close to to that, we
Okay.
can set that as a max tonight. and work
Not to
within that
exceed.
parameter.
Yeah, let's, Commissioner, okay with that? Not to exceed 15, okay.
And that will be a review of the lands within the watershed?
That would be the 112 parcels that have already been identified, not the 19 square mile watershed.
Worth a try.
Good catch. Yes.
A comment, I'm concerned going down the road about the efficacy of trying to put parcels together to make a conservation, historic type corridor. So, is it something feasible? Is it something that we want to spend on a consultant for? Do you guys, you have more contact with property owners out there than I do. Is there an appetite for this?
I think those are all the variables. We get all this data, and then as the, because there's the whole willing seller, willing buyer thing, and purchase prices. So we can plat out what we think would be, hey, here's a great corridor, and if we can only get these properties, then this would be what we want to do, and this is our top priority. But we're going to have plans B, C, D, E, and F, because you're going to hit somebody that I'm never selling,
Right.
or I want 20 million for my house, or whatever. And so we're going to have some alternate plans. That's where I think just getting all this data and then having the committee helping us kind of rack and stack and come up with, hey, maybe here's plan A, plan B, plan C, et cetera. But I don't think we're going to be able to figure all that out here. But I do think an overarching objective of having a conservation corridor type thing, or a green belt, or whatever you want to call it, would be great. And that's kind of again what my vision was with the property that partially is now still hopefully available, that could go all the way from 44 to Pioneer. So.
Oh, I wholly agree as a highway for animals, basically.
Yeah.
But the concern is, can we actually, do we have to buy these parcels, or can we help to create this corridor with conservation easements? And is this something we should consider as well?
Yeah, I mean, if we have people, I mean, that requires a willing participant on the other
Right,
side that's
right.
willing to say, I know my land has value, but I'm willing to do it for nothing. And if we have that, then all hats off. And that's then this conversation about the partnership. And do we continue with Trust for Public Land? Had a chat with Chip about some stuff he's done in Winter Park, and in that particular case, they had delegated some negotiation authority to a staff member. He was a staff member in Winter Park. And so they were able to go out and have some of these kind of back and forths, and I would like to see us heading in that direction personally. We don't have to decide that tonight, but we can maybe individually, if you all want to talk, pick Chip's brain a bit about how that worked out for them. But I think that's what we're going to have to do, because it's not scalable to have the Trust for Public Land running down from Tallahassee all the time. We're going to have to attack this locally, and honestly, someone with local connections can maybe get more than we otherwise could. Appealing to the heartstring side of this might play well for us. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good thought.
Are you signing up for the jobs?
In 3.5 years.
Yeah,
Get a blunderbuss.
it's still going. Any other discussion points for tonight on these topics? Staff, do you have all the direction that you all need? We'll be voting on this item on June 25th. I've said my spiel. It's going to be like a first reading. We're just going to vote. Everybody remember what was said.
Consent agenda.
Consent agenda, there you go.
No first reading. Someone will pull it if it's on consent.
Yeah, right, but yeah. Okay. All good? Commissioners, all good? Meeting is adjourned.
Good job, Mayor.